Of course, I was not, so thank you for the reminder. Welcome, everybody who's joining us for 10 Things Your Law Firm Website Must Have in 2018. I'm Guy, and joined by Kelly. And feel free for attendees to submit any questions you might have as we walk through this. You know, I'm always a little bit reluctant to say things like must have, but because, you know, everybody's has slightly different needs on their website, but we're going to try to focus on the things that you really probably ought to should have in 2018. And let's dive in.
All right.
So, Kelly, Guy, Attorney Sync, that's us. And let's start with number one.
It must be fast. But what does that even mean? Because fast is, everybody wants everything faster. Everybody wants to have things be immediate. And I think immediate is a pretty good word for what we're looking for in website speed.
I think that's right. I mean, you know, just think about how you use the internet. If a page is slow to load, if it's, you know, you're having trouble connecting, you're not going to stick around very long, right? Most people are going to click back. So I think that a good general guideline is your pages need to load in about a second. And I like GT metrics. Google speed page insights thing's fine, but I really like GT metrics for speed testing or web page speed test. And a lot of the issues that, you know, the major issues that can hurt speed are hosting. So economy class hosting and shared hosting environments can be a problem. Database calls. So if you're on WordPress, I love WordPress. This is any database enabled website has this problem. But if you're making a bunch of calls to the database, so if you have superfluous plugins or if you have theme files, things like that can create more database calls and slow things down. That's another big one. And of course, as we mentioned here, image size. So finding ways to, whether it's using content delivery network or image compression. And there are some tools for WordPress, especially like that can help with image compression, but those are usually the big signs. But if you're loaded in GT metrics or Google Speed Checker, the short version is that if it's taking more than a second for your pages to load, you've got opportunity for improvement. You should probably make that a priority.
Absolutely. The optimize image size, compressing image, all of that stuff. Are there any tools or things that people can use to easily do that? Or if you're using WordPress, is that available in there? How can people make sure that their image sizes and videos are small?
Yeah, I think I would just search for WordPress image compression, and you'll find a bunch of plugins and documentation on it. You know, it's again, because this is trying to be an all-inclusive type of webinar. I think understanding what your options are for image compression. I mean, I could tell you a couple that we use. Smush It comes to mind, but there are some other ones that are fine. But the big thing is really understanding if you have a very image-driven site that you want to be making sure you're optimizing image both sizes and trying to find ways to do compression. But it's so all over the map because it's like, you know, does your host provide a content delivery network? Because if so, then that'll go a long way to helping it. Image caching, compression, and then also just, I think some people too will add images for the sake of adding images. So there are even instances where I would say, you know, maybe you can remove some of these images because they're not really serving the purpose that you intend. So, you know, and then of course, you know, at the root of all of this is really doing things like choosing good hosts, right? Because if you're trying, hosting is not the place to cut costs, in my opinion. You know, we're big WP Engine fans, and it goes a long way to help speed when you're using a hosting environment that is really focused on speed. But it's just not. I think that speed is one of those things that people overlook. You know, they just don't think about it that much. And if it's loading, another big mistake people make is like, oh, well, my site loads on when I pull it up all the time. Well, it's like, yeah, because you pull it up all the time, so it's the site's cached on your device. But if you're a brand, if you don't have any cached images, then it's the first time people are loading. you're going to see that it's a lot slower. So, you can see that in Google Analytics too. Like Google Analytics will do page load time. That's another place to kind of check and benchmark to see how fast things are going, but it's got to be fast.
Got to be fast. It also must be secure. So I got this list, and there were a few other things that are a little bit more technical, even that I left off, although these are extremely technical. But I got this list right out of Google. What is it that they want to see for your website security? So Guy, let's go through them real quick and talk about what people need to do or what you should look for and avoid.
Yeah, I think the big one, the big thing here is getting to the, putting a TSL certificate in place that secures the entire domain, subdomains. Again, if your host, some hosts make this really easy, like with one click, using things like Let's Encrypt. Others, security certificates is a whole business. So some people will charge fees for SSL, but the two reasons why this is so important. One is, of course, you want, if someone's submitting data through your site, you want it to be secure. You don't want it to be intercepted by someone with bad intent, especially if that's potential clients, that kind of thing. But two is that Google, because Google is trying to make a push to nudge people in the direction of securing their sites, you'll actually see in search results and or when you click through to a domain that Google's giving warnings. So Chrome's presenting warnings, Google's presenting warnings. You obviously get the little not secure indicator in the address bar on web browsers too. So that's a really bad, it's a search ranking factor. Well, I don't want to oversell that. I think having security can impact how your site shows up in Google. So whether it's direct or indirect in that context, it can impact how your site shows up, which can impact where it shows up and when it shows up. And it's, obviously if a user or a visitor is getting a warning that, hey, this site isn't secure, they're going to leave, right? Why would you stick on a site with a risk that it doesn't say like, oh, this is not secure because my certificate's expired, it just says not secured. So that's a big red flag to users and they're going to click back.
Absolutely.
So some other things too, these are good points up here. So from an SEO standpoint, crawling and indexing issues, one of the big things to remember is you need to treat your secure and non-secure versions of your site as totally separate sites, meaning from a search standpoint, all of your HTTP statuses should redirect to HTTPS. Otherwise, if you get both versions of your site, the secure and non-secure version indexed, Google's going to treat that as two separate sites, so you're going to have potentially duplicate page issues. So if you work with a web administrator, bring this up with them. We'll put in, I think we can, if you just search for security documentation in Google, they'll list a lot of the specifics here, but it's really important that you're making sure that you don't have both the secure and non-secure version getting crawled and indexed. And make it domain-wide. Another thing that we always see, which is like some things will be secured on the site and some things won't. So especially if you're using like third-party scripts. So if you're using like a call tracking script or you're delivering JavaScript from other sources, if those aren't secure, you'll get this mixed security elements problem. And that'll also cause security issues because Google will say, well, this part's secure, this part's not, so we can't give it a full secure validation. So make sure that if you're using any third-party scripts, if you're hosting content from other third-party sites, all those need to be secure as well.
All right. What's next?
Moving right along.
We got number 2 and number 3. Your website must work across popular devices. So this means to me responsive web design, which is, of course, as you can see on the screen here, that your website will change how it looks based on the size of the device. And this is just because if you're going on any website where it pulls up a mobile site that is totally separate from the regular site and you can't see things like the blog page or that sort of thing, your users are, or your website visitors are not getting the full experience of your website.
Yeah, I think that's right. I guess I would say 99% of the time, responsive design is probably the way to go. There are very few exceptions, but certainly not a huge fan of like M dot domains, like a separate web pages for mobile. And really, even though you could make some of those work, it's a huge administrative nightmare because you've got different versions, and so it's very easy to break. And that's what I see most of the time is, you know, people that are very pro MDOT or separate mobile sites. Most of the time that I look at, I start digging into some of the problems they're having, it's because they've created administration headaches for themselves versus having a single website or single web page that is responsive to the device. And, you know, this goes back to the same things we've talked about for a long time now. You know, if you've got people coming to your site, they're looking for information about you, they want to contact you, and they've got to pinch and zoom and swipe. It's a headache. And mobile friendliness is in Google's special sauce. So if your sites don't load properly on mobile, it's going to be more difficult for you to compete in search rankings too. So, you know, again, the buzzwords here, I think I'd be looking up are, if you're on WordPress, responsive WordPress themes, you know, check your site, pull your site up on your phone. If you've got to swipe and zoom and pinch and all that kind of stuff to be able to read the pages, you got a problem. If it's loading on a desktop, tablet, mobile device, across devices too, that's another thing that you got to make sure you're checking it on different browsers and different operating systems, because sometimes that can be a problem. So if you don't want to use one of those emulators, one of the best ways to test this is to use Chrome Developer Tools. So Chrome Developer Tools is built right into Chrome, and you can actually switch the type of device on your desktop. So you can look at what your web pages look like on an iPhone or an Android device right on your desktop. So check out Chrome Developer Tools. It's one of the, I find that's been one of the best tools for troubleshooting some of these problems.
Awesome. Number 4, must use structured data.
Yeah, so if you've never had any experience with structured data, the very short version of structured data is that it's markup that tells machines more information about your web pages. So, you know, in the context of search engines try to do their best to figure out what's on your page. They use things like, you've heard, page titles, meta descriptions, headings, the content on your page. Structured data adds some specificity to that. So in the context of legal, there's a specific one for attorneys, but it's actually called legal services now. So if you go to schema.org and you search for attorney or law firm, you're going to see 2 different schemas. And I know a lot of people have been talking about the attorney schema, but the attorney schema technically is deprecated, so you want to use legal services. But this is going to help. The more attributes that you can provide about your firm, my view of this is future-proofing your website, because it stands to reason that search engines are going to start to use many of the attributes that we would use in the real world to distinguish between different practices. So things like year founded, you know, memberships, if you're a member or you're in a leadership role at a professional society, all that stuff can be communicated to the search engine through structured data. You can really go down the rabbit hole on all the stuff you can add. Basics, legal services schema, local business schema, so like, you know, firm name, address, phone, hours, that kind of stuff makes a lot of sense. And, you know, again, the more that you can provide, more information you can provide, the more likely it is that Google's going to start to use some of that information to determine how and where to show your firm and your pages and make those connections. So, and of course, for featured snippets, that kind of stuff, like rich search features, structured data is what generates the little stars. So like aggregate review markup, that's structured data. So the little stars with the testimonials that you see, both on attorney websites as well as like on Facebook and Yelp and that kind of stuff. That's what we're talking about here.
All right, number 5. Must
halfway there.
Conversions. Yep, halfway there. And I'm just going to let everybody know this is the last more technical one. The rest of them are a little bit more about best practices. I mean, they're all best practices, but a little bit more on the actual things to do. But tracking goal conversions. Again, this came right from Google, the kinds of things that the 4 examples of different goals that you would want to track, and then how you can kind of go about putting them in place. So URL destination goals, making sure that your leads are being tracked. So if you have a contact form, somebody fills it out, and then the next page that they go to, the add-on page saying, thank you for contacting us, we'll get back to you. You would want to track that that URL in Google so that you know how many people have gotten to that page.
Yeah, I think that the the 30,000 foot view of this is being able to understand where people are coming from and what they're doing that has value for your law firm, right? So a lot of lawyers are surprised to learn that you can actually track like phone calls by source to a specific page, or a form fill to a specific user, or a guide download, or all these different events that you can track. Whatever you're think of goals as the things that have value for you, that you're trying to motivate visitors to do. So for most lawyers, consumer facing practices, it's phone calls, form fills, maybe subscribe to receive email tips. Those are the things you want to create as goal conversions. In terms of, depending on what your priorities are for tracking, call tracking to a goal conversion analytics. Now you can run a report and see, okay, organic search generated me this many phone calls in the last month. That's the way to hold your web marketing folks accountable. It also helps you understand like return on ad spend. So if you're a pay-per-click advertiser, to me, it's imperative if you're going to spend money online, you can track that back to phone calls and eventually fees from those sessions. And that's the role that goal conversion tracking plays. So to me, super important stuff. If you're spending money online and you're not tracking specific goal conversions, I think I'd be thinking about putting everything on pause until you got that fixed first.
Yeah. And I know Guy and I have both done Google Analytics training. And so this stuff might be a little more, the putting in goal conversions might be a little bit more familiar to us. But just to see what the average person would get when they Googled how to set up Google Analytics goals, I typed that in and I found a really easy 4-step process that just breaks it down in plain English instead of looking at a 10-minute Google video and then being like, wait, what? So just type it into Google. It's out there. You can easily find how to put this stuff in and keep track of that.
Number 6.
Yes. Must have rich multimedia. There are a lot of little photos up there, and I did that on purpose, everybody, because I wanted you to see just how many different things that means and how many different ways that can look on your website. So rich multimedia, photography, video, lots of different stuff on there.
Yeah, I think for me, the big ones I look at are obviously imagery, static images, video. Video's consuming the web. It's most people, especially as you demographically look at users in younger demographics, age groups, video is the preferred media of choice online. Now, that is not to say that video is, just put a video on every page of your, whether it's, some commercial that you're using, but finding ways to add video to your site is a very effective way for professional services, including law firms, to give people a sense of what it's going to be like to work with them, what their personality is, demonstrate knowledge, skill, and experience. So, you know, the finding ways to put video on your site, whether it's, you know, just short 30-second kind of about you or who you help, changes in the law, things that are going on that are related to your practice, like causes or charities that you support. That's the kind of stuff that people want to see. It does really well on websites, it does really well on social media. And so if you're, some of the things to think about including video, you know, are choices between hosting it on YouTube and embedding it on your site, or using something like Wistia to have it hosted. And there's a whole consideration set that we could go through to talk about that. But I would say definitely investigate Wistia. They do a lot of nice things for video hosting and getting the proper markup and adding little bells and whistles to video. They also give a lot of coaching information. So they talk about getting better at actually producing video, because if you don't have a lot of experience doing video, it might be uncomfortable for you at first. And so they give you some nice ways to, little hacks and things you can do to produce better videos without having to become a, you know, professional production company.
Yes, and I will refer people also to last month's webinar, which is we uploaded the recording of it into Wistia, and that is right on the Attorney Sync website. So if you want some more tips on how and why to use video, we've got that there as well.
Great. Number 7.
Yes, must be share and link worthy. This is definitely the how in the heck do I get things to get people to share them? How do I get something to go viral? All of this stuff. Viral is a special case. That's going to be a little bit more specific and kind of just depend on whether people are responding to it, engaged with it. But in order to get your stuff to be, your website, your blog posts, anything on there, to be share and link worthy, you're going to need to do a few things. First of all, provide a unique opinion on a particular subject. So the thing that makes sense most to do is provide opinions on things in your particular practice area that are specific to cases that you work on without using identifying information, or unique in particular situations that someone could be having trouble with, that you can then do a quick little video on how you can help or what your opinion is. Next, I have a little newspapery deal down there, because one really, really great thing to do is, if you see something in the news, a story online that could potentially affect your practice area, you're going to want to talk about that, give your professional opinion, and just say what you would maybe do in that situation for that person. Educating people, using kind of like what I have here, using infographics to describe terms or processes or definitions that can kind of take maybe a particular law and then turn it into something that is more visually stimulating and that would make sense to the average layperson.
Yeah, and I'll add this. I think all that you know, the legal specifics content has its place. But I think one of the things that lawyers tend not to do as good of a job on is more of like the social content, or the you know, the causes that they are passionate about, or the local community activities. That's the kind of stuff, especially when you're talking about share-worthy, that's the kind of stuff that is going to do a lot better on social platforms. So if you're trying to stay top of mind with a particular audience, trying to engage a local audience, if your posts and pages and social interactions are always tied to legal services stuff, you're going to have a harder time maintaining the audience on those platforms. So it's not to say that you shouldn't be putting out there stuff that's relevant related to your practice. But think about all the other things that you might do. You know, do you coach youth sports? Do you do volunteer work in the community? Are there specific educational things that are relevant to your practice that aren't like legal specific? So, you know, if you're an injury attorney, talking about safety tips, talking about especially seasonal safety tips, back to school safety tips, ending distracted driving campaign, the awareness campaigns. That's the kind of stuff that it's like taking the leadership on particular issues, especially in the local community. That's the stuff that people want to engage with, they want to share, they want to help promote. If you're just posting, you know, latest update on, you know, automobile liability stuff, I think you're going to have a harder time maintaining that shareability and linkability with the audience. So I think the big thing for me here is think about what's actually working, monitor that on Facebook, because Facebook will, things like Facebook, I mean, all the social platforms have insights and engagement analysis, but don't be so focused on some of the vanity metrics. Focus on like engagement. So is what you're posting on Facebook generating comments, shares, and likes versus, you know, am I getting more followers or something like that? So that's what I'd be focusing on. Part of it is just coming up with topics that are actually interesting to the audience. But I tend to find that if you focus on local community events, volunteer work, that's the stuff that people actually want to gravitate towards and share on social platforms. So I'd find ways to do more of that and perhaps less of just the rote kind of practice area, legal stuff. My 2 cents. Number 8.
Yes. Built with your audience and objectives in mind. So i.e. user experience. I have a lot of stuff up here on this one, but my lovely pie chart, which shows that for user experience, there are a lot of things that come into play here, but I'll just kind of go through them. Of course, content strategy is one. So making sure that you have things that people are going to want to engage with and read, or that just show who you are as a lawyer, who your law firm is, and the kind of messaging that you want to get across. Your keyword research on there. So what kinds of things are people searching for that you can come up with? User interface, how are people using your website? What does it look like and feel like? And then technical information architecture. The platform you're using can be important. Like you was talking about earlier, the hosting. And then, of course, accessibility. I have talked about this a bit. I have a blog post about how making sure that your website is accessible for people who maybe use a screen reader or who, and then they would need alt tags on your images. That kind of thing can help both boost your search results, but then also get people to actually want to be on your website for more than click in and click out.
Yeah, I think accessibility is a great example. You know, especially if you're an attorney that helps people with disabilities, and your site doesn't have a lot of the ADA basic recommendations for accessibility. It's like, what are you telling those people about how you care about your clients, right? I think that's just one example. You know, ultimately, the thing that people always, I think it's hard to understand, is that your website's often your first impression for a new client, right? So if someone is referred your name or your firm's name, no matter how that happens, if it happens just, you know, old-fashioned word of mouth, a friend or a family member is making a referral, people are going to look you up online. And so again, we see so many law firm websites that look like they haven't been updated in 20 years. Like, what kind of message are you sending to people? You know, to me, that's like if you're having a face-to-face, or you're having somebody come into your office, and that your office or your personal appearance doesn't reflect what you want to stand for professionally, the website's usually, before you even get to that, you know, people are going to go look you up online before they come meet you face-to-face, and what they find is going to play some role and how they're forming an impression about your practice. So, if it looks like you haven't updated your website in 20 years, or if it loads slowly, or all the things that we're talking about today, those are the types of things that can really be a professional liability in terms of client development if you're not focusing on that stuff. If it's difficult to read, what are you telling people? For some people, that's going to be an indicator that might not be the right fit for them.
Yeah. Maybe that you're not in touch with what's going on in today's world, that you, even something, I know this is a little bit touchy, but even something that maybe you can't afford to update your website, and that could make a poor impression on someone.
Right. And my thing about that is like, that's not even really a fair excuse anymore, because you can do it yourself, from whether it's WordPress, or even if you want to go proprietary, Squarespace, it's like you're talking about like $6 to $10 a month. So, again, it's all relative, and I get it, but that kind of investment in your first impression, you're probably spending more on business cards.
Yeah,
we do, because we love Hoban cards, which are amazing. Go check those out too. Plug for Hoban. I thought it was Hoban too, by the way, but
Hoban. Yeah, who knew?
Anyway, all right, moving on. Number 9.
All right. Must communicate how uniquely qualified you are to help. So this goes with your, again, like the previous one, the impression that you're making. So what is it that you can offer to someone before, I say this over and over again, what is it that you can offer to someone before they even walk in the door or pick up the phone to call you, that lets them know that you are the expert? One caveat to that expert, and this completely isn't on there, but I guess it does kind of go under the trust thing. But this came up the other day for me, and that is grade level. Make sure that you're writing with your end client in mind. So who is that person, and what is the average grade level that they would read under? The average American is 7th to 8th grade reading level. So you can test that out really easily, just to make sure that you're communicating in a way that does inspire trust and kind of connect with them a little bit better, as opposed to just writing a legal brief on your website.
Right. And, if your clients are lawyers, or your clients, including general counsel of Fortune 500 companies, then you're going to need to publish a different way than if you're, marketing to just consumers that might search on some kind of practice area plus city attorney kind of queries. So my big thing here is whether you call it unique value proposition, selling proposition, the most important thing you can do, and this is kind of like marketing 101, is what makes you different from your competition. And that you need to communicate that on your website and really through everything that you do. But it doesn't always have to be the traditional kind of experience, and I fight really hard, and I went to a great law school stuff. So when I was we were at Lawyeronomics conference this last week, which hopefully they're going to publish some of those sessions. I thought there were some really good sessions. I'm not sure if they are or not, but my topic was on putting clients at the center of your practice and the impact that can have on client development. A little plug for my session. But the thing is that if you're a younger lawyer and you don't have, you can't say things like 35 years of experience in whatever, then you need to focus on some of the things that you can actually deliver on. And so some of those things might be that you don't have as many clients, and so the service level that you can provide, that might be your competitive advantage. It might be that you have adopted technology, and so your competitors might be requiring clients to come sign retainers and agreements and interrogatories and all this kind of stuff in person, and you might be able to do that virtually. You might be able to do client communication better. So that can be a huge competitive advantage that you need to put on your website, that you have that that unique ability that some of your competition might not have. And so identifying those things is really, really important. and then being able to communicate those both on your website and in providing that remarkable service to clients, that those clients are going online and singing your praises. So getting clients to say nice things about you online is also really important, whether that's on Google My Business reviews or publishing testimonials on your website. Obviously, there's some ethical considerations, so make sure you check your state bar's rules. Some of the states are a little bit more, give a little more guidance and are a little bit more restrictive about how you can actually use testimonials. But those are the things that are going to make you unique, right? So your competitors aren't going to be able to have your specific clients go leave them reviews on their website. That's your competitive advantage. Being a great listener, being a great communicator, those can become huge competitive advantages that don't relate to, I'm the most knowledgeable and experienced attorney in this particular area.
Yeah, and when everyone else in your practice area has that on their website, it starts to lose its meaning and its value very quickly. In the space are doing and the kinds of things that they're saying about themselves. And if you're very similar, then just try to find your differentiators, try to figure out and see what it is that could set you apart from everyone else in your area.
All right, number 10.
Yes, we were going to try to keep this to a half an hour. We've gone over that a little bit, but everybody's hanging in, so appreciate it. And this is the last one, the biggie. It must convert. The conversion steps here, just kind of the sales funnel, so to speak, of awareness, interest, decision, and action. So how can you get people from step one all the way to taking action and contacting you?
Yeah, I think so. From a basic framework, I think that the awareness, interest, decision, action kind of thinking is a good starting point. But I would also encourage people to go check out what Google has to say about micro moments, to use the buzzword. But long story short is that the way that we consume information online and make buying and hiring decisions is going under drastic change mostly because of smartphones, but it's not as linear as it used to be. And so I think that this becomes much more difficult, especially if you're not familiar with even the basics. But the short version is that if you're spending time and money online and you can't tie that back to some kind of activity or metric that has meaning for your practice, you need to spend some time focusing on this stuff more. So again, the simple one is if you're not tracking in potential client inquiries through your website, or you're not tracking potential client inquiries through an AdWords campaign or Facebook campaign or whatever you're doing online, you've got to put that infrastructure in place, because otherwise you're always going to be asking the question of, what is the value of any of this stuff? If you can't tie specific potential client inquiries at least, so not even fees. Ideally, you're tracking this to fees, so you can do things like, return on ad spend and cost per client analysis. But if you can't do those, at least be able to say, hey, we got phone calls. Our website turned into phone calls, generally from these sources, or it turned into form inquiries. But if you're not seeing that, if you're not connecting that, or if you're working with web marketing people that aren't helping you understand how that's working, that's the starting point for most of this stuff. You got to get the blocking and tackling right of speed and responsiveness. But this is really where, from a business standpoint, this is where the internet or any marketing or advertising activities have to be measured by. Is it converting into new business for us? And not only just is it, but is it doing so at some kind of multiple of what we're actually spending in terms of time and money on this stuff? Or else you're always going to be wondering, I think this is working, or I'm not, or it's not working, but I don't really know. So this is the thing that I would stress that everybody should be focused on: tracking your conversions from your website to specific open case files, or whatever your objective is, right? If your objective is to get more people on a list, to be able to send them email nurturing, great. So that can be tracked, right? If your goal is to get people to watch a video, that can be considered a conversion to be tracked. But at the end of the day, when you're really using conversion, we're talking about converting into new clients. And ultimately, you want to be able to track cost per client and return on investment, return on ad spend on a client basis.
Yeah. Well, and if you, just one little caveat there, if you get a ton of leads through your website and you're like, yeah, but I'm not getting any clients, then there's something different missing there. They're either, the content on your website needs to narrow down more to, where it actually fits the kind of client you can work with, or your intake process isn't amazing. That's all.
That's all we have. So
yeah.
Thanks for sticking around. We hope you have a wonderful long Memorial Day weekend. If you had questions that weren't clear to you from this, feel free to shoot us messages. We're happy to try to answer them. Also, we're wide open to feedback, webinar topic suggestions, and of course, if you're interested in participating in the Clienting podcast, you can email us for that as well. And we're always interested in talking to lawyers and legal marketing folks about what's working, what's not working in legal marketing on the web or in the regular not web.
Yeah, person to person networking.
So thanks again. Have an enjoyable rest of your day and keep your eyes out for our next webinar.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.